Well, it looks like we are at our start time here. We've got about 73 folks with us. We had over 180 people who registered to participate with us today. So that is very exciting. And we'll do our best to accommodate as many folks as we can. So welcome everyone today. I'm so happy to see so many of you, and we really look forward to spending some time together today. I did just want to share with you that we're tweaking a little bit of how we're doing things today based on our first session last week. Each week we will start out with kind of a legislative update session. And so we will go ahead, and I'm just gonna keep stopping video for folks, as good as it is to see you all. And we will start each session with a little bit of a legislative update with Dustin Miller. And then we'll move into a main presentation after that. And then we will spend some time after the main presentation dividing folks up into breakout rooms. We will evenly divide, as evenly as we can, assign everybody to different breakout rooms. This time they're all going to have the same theme. So I know last week some folks were wishing that they had been in a different topic. So each week we're going to try and focus our breakout rooms around the main theme topic, so that we can go ahead and I think we're moving to our time together. Yeah. So we'll talk about and have deeper discussion on each of those topics together in the breakout room. Now here's the important information. So we are so excited that we have Dustin with us, and he will continue to be presenting our content in this main room. So this is our main room here that we're all in together now. Dustin will continue once we move everybody to the breakout rooms. He'll stay here with us, and he will give a legislative matters presentation. We're going to record that and send it out afterwards. So if you want to prioritize the conversation with your colleagues, you're most welcome to do that. If you want to focus on sort of these legislative updates, you're welcome to stay with us in the main room. As we get started, you can, kind of make a choice to move back here at any point. And then we will all come back together here with a couple of minutes remaining with our time together so that we can talk about what we're going to be presenting next week. So I hope that makes sense to folks. You can, you're welcome to enter questions into the chat room. Let's see, I've got a few questions, a few good mornings from folks. And so we will get started with Dustin. Dustin, did you want to join us via your video? And we can get started. Oops, we'll go back a slide. We're gonna go back to Dustin's slide. There we go. Dustin, I know I took your video off. If you want to start your video again or request to start that.
It won't let me start it. It shows that you're stopping it.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can find you in here and start you again. I want to give you all the powers. So we'll try and get that started. And I will have to then go through here as I'm moving folks around and give them back their video privileges. Oh, okay. We're in alphabetical order here, I think. Here we go. Dustin. Sorry, Dustin Ross. I will try and find you, but Dustin, if you want to join us by voice, we have your glamour shot here, so we should be good there.
Yeah, I can be brief too. There's no need to run through the slides. You can jump once I'm done. based upon the individual sessions that have been scheduled with me, and that service that United Way and the Community Foundation has put together that I hope many of you will take advantage of, and I know some have already this week. I'm seeing a lot of questions that are pretty similar about the SBA programs, and then the more larger question about general balance of the impacts on employers and employees in the nonprofit sector for different relief packages. So that's what I'm going to be covering in the main room. Not only where we're at on the PPP and who is eligible, but also we're also going to talk about the impacts on this expanded emergency family leave, also talking about the potential balance of the employee retention tax credit. So those are the things we're going to be covering in the main room. And that's based upon the different one-on-ones that have been scheduled with me this week. And I say that because I encourage all of you to reach out to Renee and United Way, schedule time with me as well to go through those. And just a little preview before I end, next week I'm going to cover other appropriations and other potential programs and money that people can go after that was in the CARES Act. But this week we're going to cover that kind of balance decision making of the different programs that have come out through the two pieces of legislation.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you. Sorry, we're just having a few different technical things that we have to keep track of while we're listening. So thank you, Dustin, for that overview, and we will start that presentation, as I said, after we have our main presentation from Suzanne, Nicole, and Daniel. So I am going to go through and give my friends there some video privileges. If others have some questions for Dustin, and actually we'll talk a little bit at the end about the ask line that we have set up with our partners who are hosting these community circle conversations. I know that that has been popular, and people are sending you those questions in advance, but we'll talk a little bit about that then, Dustin, in the main room also. So I am going to go ahead and get our panelists all teed up with video. And we've got Suzanne. Suzanne, would you like to, I'm gonna unmute you, and I'm gonna unmute Daniel. Would you like to go ahead and introduce our panelists for today?
Yeah, thank you very much, Brianne, and welcome to everyone on the call this morning. What a great snowy, yuck, day it is. I just want to begin by saying a giant thank you to each of you. Today's conversation is going to center around leading in a time of crisis, and clearly you are all shouldering the weight and burden and opportunities that come with that in this time. And I just want to say I've been in awe, not surprised, but in awe of all of your bravery, your fierce passion for the missions that you represent, and how you've been such tremendous caretakers of each other. And so just a deep thank you for that. I think as we move forward, I want to challenge all of us in our varying roles of leadership to be builders. At Mid-Iowa Health Foundation, we've been focusing a lot on system change. I think as we move forward, we're going to need to think of it as system building and the opportunities that come with that. Challenge us all to be connectors. There is nothing in this that we can do alone. And we always know that. And in times like this, we are profoundly reminded of that. We're going to need to be relentless advocates for those in our community whose voice has been historically diminished or ignored. And we are all now in positions of great responsibility that we are relentless advocates moving forward. And then I guess challenge all of us to be caretakers of ourselves. We're often good at being caretakers of others, but we need to be caretakers of ourselves. I was recently reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to read some of her work, but in her book, she says, courage and fear are not mutually exclusive. Most of us feel brave and afraid at the exact same time. And so that really just, it continues to strike a chord with me. And I was sitting with my girls this morning and was just, I was reminded that hope is contagious, courage is contagious, compassion is contagious, and the power of connections is contagious. And so how you are all beacons of light in that space, and thank you for the work you're doing in this time. So enough from me, but speaking of courageous, compassionate, and community connectors, for this Leading in a Time of Crisis, I invited two incredible community leaders we have the privilege of learning from and being inspired by, Daniel Hoffman-Zinnel from Proteus and Nicole Beeman from Orchard Place, to talk about how they are navigating their roles as leaders in their organizations and the community in this time. And I challenge them to come up with really their top 5 pieces of advice, things they've learned either by successes or failures. And so I'm grateful that they both agreed to share some of those thoughts with us. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it to Nicole. Is Nicole first? And maybe we can bring Nicole's video up.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Suzanne, and for the introduction. And it's nice to virtually see so many of you. I think, you know, I just sit here for a minute and I'm like, whew, what a journey. I'm pretty sure it's been a month, but it feels a little bit more like a year. And I'm pretty sure most of us feel that. You know, I think when Suzanne asked if I would share this, you know, absolutely. It's hard to kind of put your thoughts together. I think I've learned a lot, and I've used and put to use many leadership skills that have been developed over a long course of time, right? Learning from others, learning from formal leadership programs. But when you're put into a situation like all of us were a month ago, I think your leadership just comes from pure intuition. And really you're using things that are in there, right? But you're making decisions and you're moving things forward, sometimes without a lot of time to digest, which I think many of us generally like to do. So in my role, I'm at Orchard Place. I'm at Child Guidance Center, which is our outpatient division. I've been here about 6 years. And while I am a licensed independent social worker, I do not practice my clinical skills with clients. I practice them with my staff. But it's a very different setting than I'd ever been in before. For those of you that know me, I spent 17 years in the United Way world working with many community partners. In this setting, I'm actually in a clinic-based setting, so it's really different. And so one of the things that I talk about here right now is our first step is to recognize it, to name it, and to sit with it. And the it is the trauma. the collective trauma that our entire country, our entire world is sitting with right now. That's been extremely powerful for me, because not unlike anybody else, we all have had things that have gone upside down and inside out in these last 4 weeks. Not only with our personal life, our professional life, our social life, our spiritual life. And usually when one thing goes out of balance, you have those others to sort of bring it back together. But the collective upside down that we've all experienced in the last 4 weeks is extremely powerful. And I do think we just need to recognize that, name it, and sit with it. So when Suzanne asked me top 5 pieces of advice, it's kind of hard to put all that in one place, but these are the things that came top of my mind, is to be visible. And right now that's sort of hard, but you know, we're all getting used to, what does our hair look like? You know, is this really what I look like on screen? Yep, this is really how people experience us every day. So one of the things that we've done here, we've got 130 staff, and right now there are 4 of us in the building. We mobilized really quickly to get people off-site, providing telehealth from their homes. And so one of the things that we found was we're using GoToMeetings, but we have team huddles for various teams throughout the day and throughout the week. And that's been extremely powerful because I have a certain portion of my staff. I have 50 staff that don't normally work in the building. They're based in schools. I get to see those guys 3 times a week, where I don't normally get to do that. So that's a powerful part, right? But just being visible, because I think one of the things we've seen is everyone's pushed off site. You don't have that normal connection. You don't have that ability to walk down the hall and say, hey, how's it going? Or can we talk through this? So that opportunity to be visible is so important, especially as it's been quick and uncertain change. I think the other part about being visible is being vulnerable. And that is a great skill as a leader. I have shared a number of things with my staff in writing. I have shared a number of things with my staff virtually, and I just think it's powerful. It brings us together in different ways. The other top piece of advice is self-care. For those of you that know me, this is a soapbox I stand on often. But if we can't care for ourselves, we can't care for others. And this is a really important place where, when I talked about trauma, you know, recognize it, name it, sit with it. I'm not gonna lie, I've had a few moments where I've gone home and literally laid on the sofa and cried. Cried for the losses of what my family is experiencing, what my organization is experiencing, but that's self-care for me, right? It gives me a way to let that part out, to grieve that process. I also walk my dog every day. I've been trying to do the virtual yoga, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm sort of struggling with that. But what are those ways, and we have to define those, right? Of how do we manage ourselves? How do we turn this off? Especially when we're spending 6-8 hours on a screen, we have to find that way to balance ourselves out. I could spend a whole hour on self-care, but just please understand that that is so critically important right now, and checking in with other people about what are they doing for their self-care. My third piece is appreciation. You know, thank and acknowledge people. I'm not sure we do that enough every day anyhow, but in times like this where we were literally, I felt like I was literally pushing my staff out the door, go home, get set up, you know, do your telehealth. It's important to thank them and recognize the change that they've had in their work. Some people are managing kids at home. Some people are at home all by themselves and not used to that. You know, some people have technology challenges. Hopefully we've worked through some of those, but showing that appreciation that you've changed and you've adapted and you've moved through this time period. The fourth thing I'd talk about is communication. I think we have found that we can't communicate enough. Here at Orchard Place, you know, we have almost 400 staff, and we have daily emails that are coming out, both from Ann as our CEO, but then in each of our individual branches. And those are really meant to keep staff in the loop, like what's going on, what do you need to know today, what's changed. The change part has slowed down a little bit for us here on the outpatient side, not for our friends in residential. Their change continues to move quite rapidly. And I think it's just important that people know what's going on, how to get a hold of you, how to ask a question. We just can't over communicate. And then my fifth piece of advice is the quote that I have here right on my screen that has really stuck with me and has been powerful for me. And that is, replace the fear of the unknown with curiosity. And Suzanne talked about how those, fear and hope and things are contagious. Well, there was a whole lot of fear. I don't feel it as much now, but in those first couple of weeks, people didn't know what was going on, and they were trying to ask questions to get clarity, and there weren't answers. We were in a very gray spot, and we still are to a large extent. But what I started understanding is, if I start getting curious about things and saying, so what, and why, and what's next, then I start to develop hope. And so I just keep trying to, when I face that thought of fear, what can I learn from that? What can I understand? What can I build towards the future? The piece I leave you with is what we are really trying to do as an organization is understand, and I hope many of you are doing this, what will we take away from this that we'll keep doing? As hard as some of the lessons have been, I think there have been some great things that we've learned in the last month that will be really powerful going forward. And mine really actually center around these top 5 things. That's why I put them on here. And there are some things that will be more systemic, but there are things that I think we can each do individually and within our organizations. So I thank you for your time, and I'll kick it back to Suzanne.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. Those are fantastic, and we'll work to capture them and see if we can send them out to this whole group. Daniel, you are up, and I think we've got about our 5 to 7 minutes for you to share, and then we're going to break into the small groups to discuss further. So let me see if I can see Daniel pop up here.
Well, good morning, everybody. I've been telling a lot of people I'm perfecting the business attire mullet. So business on top, and I am for sure wearing sweatpants on the bottom, but you won't be seeing those today. But thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Nicole, for sharing those great pieces of advice. You'll probably see there's a little crossover with some of my top 5 pieces of advice, but I want to start with my first one, which is pragmatic positivity. So as Nicole mentioned, there's just a lot of fear and unknown within our community, within our teams and our staff, and within ourselves. And it's really important, as Nicole said, to acknowledge those feelings. We've been talking about with our teams, giving them permission to grieve, because this is all new to us, and we're all experiencing a lot of grief with what was to happen, with events getting canceled and those sorts of things. So giving permission to grieve, I think, is really important. But people are looking to you as leaders within our community, as a leader within the organization. They're looking to you as to how to respond to this crisis. So I can't stress enough the importance of being as positive as possible, being calm, having a sense of calmness about your leadership, about your tone is so critical, yet also still being pragmatic and realistic and acknowledging that there's going to be struggle, and we're probably not going to be able to do a lot of long-term planning, but we are for sure going to do as much planning as we can for 30 days at a time, or however long you're going to plan for the future. And one of my, if you are a Harry Potter fan, my Patronus is a duck, and it's always been a duck, but I can't stress enough the importance of exemplifying the duck characteristics, which are floating right across the pond or the lake, but underneath their legs are pedaling as quickly as possible. So that's the metaphor I try to exemplify each and every day. Number 2 is constant communication. I have had more frequent communication, more face-to-face communication with everyone on my team and across the organization. And I even had a staff member mention today that she's seen the faces of our team members more the last 4 weeks than she has the last year. So I think that shows that we are doing something right in engaging people. Having weekly all-staff check-ins. I know some organizations are doing daily check-ins within their entire organization. We've offered opportunities for engagement outside of work. So we started a private Facebook group for staff to just share personal updates, photos, things that they're working on, hobbies, those sorts of things. But I think staff are really looking for structure. So we've implemented a weekly plan for staff to fill out every week with just their top 5 goals for the week, and then breaking out those into top 3 activities that they're working on each and every day. Number 3 is information overload. If you were like me, you probably were trying to take in as much information as possible at the beginning, and you couldn't get enough. And then it got a little overwhelming, and then it got very repetitive. And so now I think if you're like me, really trying to parse out what is not repetitive, what is important information to me as a leader, important information to us as an organization, and then also what is important for us to share. I would encourage you to limit the information that you do share, because there is just that information overload. But I had a really great piece of advice from I'm in the Health Connect Fellowship, and Rick Cozen is our mentor, and I had a conversation with him about the information overload, and he had a great piece of advice that I'm going to share with you, which is really focus on getting your information at the local level. So look to the Business Record. They've been doing an amazing job on COVID response, or the Des Moines Register, whoever your go-to local news outlet is. Use them as your information. Don't try to focus on the national or international news if you are getting overwhelmed. Really focus on the local level, because that's going to be most relevant to you in the work you're doing. Number 4, proactive innovation. We followed some, I think, really important steps that I could write a case study on, but the steps we took into place were first focusing on our employees. We wanted to make sure that they felt safe and secure and had all of the tools needed as we moved to a work from home for non-essential staff policy. The second was implementing those policies, those best practices, those tools, offering training and resources to everyone across the organization. And then we got to our clients and patients and how we were going to adapt to meet the needs of them, and how we were going to best serve them in the future. Proactive innovation is so critical right now. I think it's going to force us to develop innovations that we had never thought of before, which is, I think, a great silver lining out of all of this. Even before this happened, I started innovation meetings. So periodically across the organization, I would invite anyone from within the organization to join me in a conversation, for them to bring ideas, innovative ideas, to me, and we can talk about how they might work within our organization. So we had an innovation meeting last week, and I'm happy to share that we had some amazing ideas shared because of the current situation. So we're really being forced to utilize telehealth more often, which is great. But the innovative idea that you are hearing firsthand right now, we're launching today, is a face mask campaign specifically for farm workers. So you probably have been watching the news with some of the meatpacking plants. Our farm workers are going to still have to work, and how can we proactively work with employers to help make sure that they're putting forth recommendations to protect the farm workers, but our farm workers are also in need of face masks. So we're doing a face mask drive. If you have face masks, a sewing machine, you can find details later, but wanted to announce that today, and that was a great innovative idea shared during our innovation meeting. And then number 5 is a daily dose of joy. I think it's so critical for each of us as leaders to live out loud our values, and maybe put some on steroids right now. And one of my values is joy. If I don't have a belly laugh every day and exemplify something with joy, there's something wrong. So I try to live that value out loud every day, but especially in these times. So I started a daily dose of joy post on Facebook, just something that gave me joy, but I've also infused that into all of our staff meetings. So we do something fun, silly, or joyful, just to get people to laugh and smile and get their mind off of what's going on, and to share that gratefulness that we all have privilege. All of us on this call should recognize the privilege we have. We probably have safe homes, have access to food, and so many of our clients and patients that we serve don't have that. So really living out that gratefulness, and I challenge each and every one of you to live out loud something joyful today.
You were like the definition of a daily dose of joy, Daniel, and I'm grateful, as are many, to have you in our lives. And thank you, Daniel and Nicole, for your words today. I'm going to pitch it to Brianne to now put us into small groups where we can discuss this more and share with one another, lean on one another. So off to you, Brianne, but I'm going to leave one more quote from Desmond Tutu. He said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness." So in this time, look for, as Daniel said, the silver linings and the hope. So thank you, and off to you, Brianne.
Suzanne, Suzanne always has a really good quote. So I appreciate that about how you lead, Suzanne. And I appreciated our presenters today and some of their key takeaways. We'll be able to discuss those in the breakout rooms. What we're doing now, we learn and we innovate each week, is that if I had to turn off your video when you are coming in, we will be requesting for you to share your videos again. So you can make a choice. Nobody has to be on video this morning if you're not feeling your best, but I love Daniel's business on top, party or sweatpants on the bottom. If you would like to be on video and you want to share your video, we will be turning those on now, so you might get a request to share, and that will enable you to have your video on in the breakout rooms. Again, in the breakout rooms, those will be hosted by our funder partners. So Sally Dix will be hosting a breakout room. Angie Detlefs-Tretton will be hosting a breakout room. Eric Burmeister will be hosting a breakout room. And then we'll also have a breakout room hosted by Suzanne Minnick from the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation. So we just kind of randomly will disperse you into those rooms. However, you can come back if you choose to leave your breakout room at any point. You can come back here, and Dustin will have you share your video again, kind of lead us in this main room through the second half of your presentation, where we can go into depth a little bit more. I'll give the breakout rooms a warning before I bring you back here. And so then we'll close and we'll kind of tee up. Sally will help us tee up what we're going to be talking about next week. So we'll just be taking a moment to get everybody that capacity back to show your video if you'd like to do that. Let's see, while we are doing that, Bridget, if you could take us to Dustin and his scenario and his presentation. And I am going to go ahead and wait for the clear. I know we have about 100 people joining us today, 87 joining us today right now, and I've broken you out. So I am going to go ahead. We're getting really close to having folks able to share their videos. Just takes a couple of extra minutes. So thanks, and then I'm going to open all the rooms here. If you, for whatever reason, you need me to turn your video on, it didn't work, you can come back to the breakout room and just send me a message, and I will do my best to turn that on for you. So if you're experiencing that difficulty, I'll try and troubleshoot, but I'm going to go ahead and open all the rooms now. All right, you've been invited to join a breakout room. So we'll see you back in the main room a little bit before 9:30. And we'll send you out to those breakout rooms now. Enjoy that discussion. It looks like folks have been flown out to their breakout rooms. So if you're joining us here in the main room, you're more than welcome to do that. We'll just ask you in this room to go ahead and turn off your video if you don't mind. Great. And then let's see. All right, we should have the breakout room. Sorry, I'm just checking in on everybody real quick, Dustin, and then we'll get to you.
No problem. No problem.
All right, go ahead and get started, Dustin. Thanks. And Bridget on our team is advancing the slides, so you might just have to give her a little heads up when
No problem.
to advance for you.
No problem.
Go ahead and turn my video off for now.
Yeah, no problem. And as I talked about in the main room to start, what I'm going to cover is kind of a balance is what we're seeing out of the various congressional relief packages, kind of the balance I'm seeing for nonprofits in their decision making about their organizations, especially related to employment. So Bridget, you can advance. And I think what's important to understand, you're going to see from me over these next few weeks very similar slides because I want to make sure that people to try and simplify the complicated. I think it's very easy to read news reports and hear about an 880-page bill and be very overwhelmed. And in fact, what Daniel and them shared in the main room about, you know, the overwhelming information, that's really the case. And what I try and do is just make sure that people understand that not everything in 880 pages is important, let alone the other two bills. So it's important to understand that there were 3 congressional relief bills. The first one does not need to take a lot of people's time to understand. It was mainly about getting money into the hands of federal agencies for direct response to COVID-19. Phase 2 has some larger impacts that I'm going to cover in more depth than I did last week. But it has some major impacts in regards to sick leave and some other impacts as far as decision making of your organization. It also had some public assistance program improvements and enhancements, and it also had some SBA loans that I will also cover. Phase 3 is the major one, the CARES Act that people have heard of a lot. That's the $2 trillion bill that has programs that I'm going to try and highlight today because of the subscription levels that we're seeing in the interest. So you can advance. The CARES Act, as I've talked about before, had the big ticket money items were really in 4 buckets. The first and foremost is direct payments to taxpayers. This is you know, that money going straight into the pockets of a taxpayer. And those are likely coming out. I think they're supposed to hit this week. In fact, today, people's bank accounts. Also, there was the larger $5 billion program that related to banks and airlines and things that I'm not going to cover in depth because there's probably not a lot of interest in those. The third one that I want to cover is the Paycheck Protection Program that I covered in depth last week, but I also want to make sure that people understand the nature of the timing of getting to this. And then finally, the large $250 billion unemployment insurance expansion. These are benefits that people will have if they aren't working that I'm seeing might not be a decision that an employer is making, but as they talk to their employees and work with their employees, it's certainly decisions that people are making out of their individual pocketbooks. So it's important to understand in staffing that is a balance. While it's not something necessarily the employer controls, it's certainly something that an employee is considering. So you can advance. There are other larger programs here that have pretty large price tags. Next week, I'm going to cover these in more depth because there are opportunities in these other buckets of money. There are opportunities for individual nonprofits depending upon whether you're providing nutrition services, education services, health services. There are larger pockets of money that are of potential interest to various nonprofits in the central Iowa area. You can advance. But today, based upon the different questions that I'm getting, you can go to there we go, thank you. Based upon the questions I'm seeing, especially in the one-on-one requests, and I would recommend that any of you that are interested, please certainly set that time up. The interest level is on looking at the programs, which then leads into a conversation about the balance of employment generally and what they're seeing for staffing. If people are concerned about their revenues, they're obviously worried about how they maintain their staffing levels of their organization. And then also considering how they then would be able to provide the services, the meaningful services that they have been doing. How do they provide them at the same level? So the main programs that came out of the CARES Act were these small business administration loans. There are these other loans that are probably not as much interest to people, but they are available. The economic injury disaster loan also has, I put grant there, it's a $10,000 advance. That has had extreme interest. There was only $17 billion authorized under phase 2. They have had requests of over $380 billion. So I would anticipate that in any future congressional relief packages, that program will likely get a boost. However, getting a boost to cover the existing applications seems fairly large. So it's something we'll keep in mind. But people that are interested in these programs, it's just important to understand, as any grant program or loan program that people are already accessing, that if it's oversubscribed to that level, that there might be other programs that it might be more worth your time to go apply for. I put the Paycheck Protection Program, which we went through in more depth last week. I put that on here again because I think it's important to understand that this is a real boost to nonprofits. However, the SBA has identified this week that they have authorized over 250 billion of the 350 billion. So people that are interested, I think it's important that you need to get with your local banker. That is not one that you access directly through the agency. That is one that you access through a SBA certified lender. And so this is one that if you're interested in it, I would get to the bank this week and have a discussion. Nonprofits are eligible, but nonprofit is defined by the CARES Act as only 501c3s and also 501c19s. Those are veterans organizations. Think of American Legion or VFW. I put that out there. What the Paycheck Protection Program does is gives you the ability to get 8 weeks of payroll and some other hard costs like mortgage payments, rent, utilities as a forgivable loan over getting loan forgiveness over an 8-week period for your payroll. So that's why something that that a lot of people are trying to get to because you don't see that sort of boost. You can advance. What's important to understand is the balance that I talk about. The balance between Paycheck Protection Program versus an employee retention tax credit is what I'm initially talking about. Those are the two main programs. On the Paycheck Protection Program, if you seek out the loan forgiveness, you are not eligible to receive an employee retention tax credit. The decision making for each nonprofit is different. And so an 8-week time period, an 8-week time period might not be as valuable to somebody as maybe the ability to use payroll over the entire rest of the calendar year to get a $5,000 credit per employee based upon what the makeup of your employees look like. That's kind of the decision-making process that we're seeing for nonprofits. Is it worthwhile? Do I have a large payroll, a lot of people, or do I have a few employees that generally may not be high wage, and so it might be more valuable to be able to utilize the full calendar year to try and maximize this credit at the back end. The difference in that decision making is obviously cash now versus cash later. But that's kind of the balance that people are having to make decisions. And it's unfortunate that because of the nature of the Paycheck Protection Program's oversubscription, that people are having to make that quickly. However, those are the decision makings that we're seeing. As you can see on the employee retention credit, it's a refundable credit of up to $5,000 per employee for $10,000 in wages. So it's a $5,000 credit per employee on the $10,000 that you pay. And you can see there what your eligibility would be, and suspension condition is an or based upon suspension or your revenues being down based upon a previous year. But I put these on here. These slides are available, and we're happy to talk through this specifically with anybody in a one-on-one. Next slide, please. There are other tax provisions as well that people are interested in. And again, the delay in employer payroll tax payments is something of interest for folks that maybe you get a short time relief on those payments. It is important to understand that, again, if you're looking for the loan forgiveness portion, this is not, you're not available to do that. You can see here in the top of the slide how long those delays will be. I think in the decision-making balance that we are seeing with organizations, that ultimately a deferral is not forgiveness like the PPP, which lands people more so towards that PPP. Also, I've had some questions about the charitable contributions portions, and there have been changes there to kind of give a boost and get back to a benefit on the charitable donation side. Also of note, I know that in this new normal, people will be looking for avenues as to boost, and there is the ability to pull from retirement benefits without penalty up to a certain point. Those are some of the modifications, but again, in an 880-page bill, the balance really comes down to that SBA program, PPP, and the employee retention tax credit. And again, that's a decision that people should be talking to a tax professional within the next week if they're interested in the PPP. Next slide, please. Also, as I mentioned, in this balance, it's important to understand that your employees are certainly thinking about this. There was a lot of hubbub towards the end of the passage of the CARES Act, and it was delayed for a few hours because there is an opportunity on the supplemental unemployment compensation. It's an additional bump of $600 per month, that there are people that in some ways, depending upon their wage, may actually receive an increase in income by being unemployed. So that's a decision-making process and a balance that your organization needs to think about and when working with your employees. If you don't have, and this is a discussion I've had with different nonprofits and businesses, with maybe employees that are younger, that are lower waged, that if you don't actually have work for someone, it might be a better decision for them to be home and be furloughed. The challenge there is obviously if you have dedicated employees to your mission, is making sure to keep that connection with them. But that's a decision making process that we're seeing with people. The other two major things that we're seeing on here that are of interest is generally nonprofit organizations have been covered on unemployment, many of which is self-pay. This is now covered by the federal government to hopefully save some of those costs for nonprofits. And also expanded eligibility for unemployment benefits. This is the gig economy, stay-at-home moms that are, maybe doing childcare, people that wouldn't typically be eligible for unemployment benefits. This may be something of interest as you're advising clients of something they might not be aware of. What I will say is, with the numbers that we're seeing nationwide, that's the case in Iowa, that there can be a delay at workforce development just by the nature of the profound need that's out there. But certainly it's important to understand as you think about the balance of your employees and your nonprofit, this is a decision-making process that likely individual families are making based upon those benefits. You can advance. Last but not least in this balance, one thing that people need to grasp as well is in the phase 2, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, there were 2 major changes that nonprofits need to think about. First of all, whether or not that it applies to them, but second of all, if it does apply, what is their obligation to their employees? First of all, there's a temporary expansion it's an Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. As you could imagine, they've really directed at COVID-19, but they've created a new category for public health emergencies, similar to, and family medical leave has, typically been for employers that have over 50 employees. That is not the case for these new changes. It applies to anybody under 500. So there's a really nice webinar and information on the NYMaster website that I would encourage people to go to. I would tell you that our Labor and Employment Department has been extremely busy since COVID-19 started because people are making really difficult decisions on wanting to keep their employees, but also understanding how the laws impact them and what is the best structure to keep the organization going. Also, emergency paid sick leave. Again, what typically would have been have thresholds that maybe would leave nonprofits out. This is now requiring leave for covered employees for qualifying emergencies related to the coronavirus. So providing sick leave for people to take care of a parent, to take care of a family member. Again, I would direct people to our webinar on the NYMaster website in this balance of understanding the impact to your organization. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that these bills were only offering programs. However, it's important to understand that there are impacts like this out there that should also impact your decision-making of your organization. All of these topics and this balance of decision-making is something that we'll cover in one-on-ones if you get them scheduled, and we're interested in talking to you further about it. And that's all I have, Grant.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dustin. I just broadcast a message to our friends in the breakout rooms telling them to wrap up their conversations as well. It looks like we have a few participants who've been sticking around with us this morning. So I'll invite any of you to start your video or go ahead and enter a question. Or just voice your question to Dustin if you have one. So you'd be welcome to do that in these minutes that we have remaining.
And thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Dustin, I'll also tee up. I'm sorry, I feel a little bit like an octopus when I'm managing these. There's like 7 different screens I'm trying to pay attention to. We didn't talk much at the beginning about the ask line, did we?
Not much. I mentioned it, but I've tried to mention it a couple times, but certainly, let people know. And I also mentioned it last night on that KCCI town hall.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I will make sure that gets into the chat, and I'll call that out. Let me go ahead and close all the rooms, and they'll close in 2 minutes. So we have 2 more minutes together.
This is Barbara Decker. This is Barbara Decker from Catholic Charities. I just wanted to ask Dustin very quickly that we work with Frank Hardy at NYMaster.
I'm sorry.
That's a story for another time, right? Anyway, I just wanted to be sure that we could still schedule a one-on-one with you to go through some of these. Okay, very good. Thank you.
But, I'll certainly let Frank know. And it could be that he might want to participate as well. But Frank relies pretty heavily on me when it comes to especially these SBA programs.
Yeah. So very good overview. Thanks for the information.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it looks like folks are really starting to join us back here, so that's wonderful. We have 1 more minute left. Final things. Thanks, Bridget, for managing all of that. This is fun. I was going to tell folks after Daniel and Nicole were posting that this week's fun thing with the Finkbine with our Community Foundation staff is that we were celebrating National Grilled Cheese Day. And we had folks, they're all emailing me their pictures of grilled cheese sandwiches. And then we're going to do a matching game to see who can guess which staff member made which grilled cheese. And we're very competitive here. So I'm expecting some great participation in that. So I hope other organizations have found joy. Sally, hi. I'll keep you on. Do you want me to share what we're going to be talking about next week, or do you want to share that? You're good? I'm going to, there you go. You can do it. Great. Well, now that everybody is back with us, it looks like, I want to welcome you all back. I hope you had some good discussion in your breakout rooms. I did also, I'm going to, in the chat box to everybody, just share the article about the legislative ask line. So I know that Dustin brought that up and we referenced it at the beginning. If you're looking for some one-on-one consultation, the details around that are there. Sally, if you wanted to go ahead and just share a little bit about what we'll be discussing next week, that'd be great.
Great. Well, next week, it was interesting. There was a lot of talk about communication today in terms of leadership, and a lot of that communication centered around communicating with our teams and the people that we're working most directly with. But there's also a huge need for communication, external communication. And I know everyone's inbox is jammed full right now, and it's hard to figure out, should you be communicating and what should you be communicating, and does it really matter? Is anyone really reading anything anyway? So next week, we're going to have a presentation from Jeff White, who is the Vice President of Business Development and Strategy at Flynn Wright. They have developed this amazing deck with data and do's and don'ts and really valuable content on how to communicate externally right now and how to make your message stand out and in a good way, because I'm sure we've all seen some materials that maybe didn't quite hit the mark as intended. So I think it'll be a really good conversation. And then we can talk through maybe some of the communication challenges and resourcing and how do you prioritize when we get to the breakout groups, or if there's anything in particular about communication that people want to talk about, send it to Brianne and we'll respond to the needs of the group.
Perfect. Yes, you can absolutely email me throughout the week if you have ideas for breakouts. We do have a survey where we're trying to get some information about what will be most helpful for you. These circle conversations are really for our nonprofit leaders. I love the conversation and the information that Sally has teed up for us next week. So we hope to see you same time, same place here again next week. Meantime, search for that daily dose of joy, share it out, celebrate life's little moments with our teams, and we'll see you back here in a week. Have a great day. Bye.